Hello friends, it's Unicorn Princess here, and we're gonna have an education-y video. I don't normally get involved in like online stuff. This does not count as me getting involved. I saw this video on TikTok recently.
You are actually not the first person to comment this, and though it is a common misconception, Lolita is not based on Victorian clothes. It does draw a lot of influence for certain dresses and for certain aesthetics. Like the kind of Lolita that I like to wear does draw a lot of reference from Rococo. And the kind of Lolita that I wear is called Hime Lolita, which is strongly intertwined with a fashion called Hime Gyaru. However, I kind of feel like whenever this comment is stated, it's stated with a little bit of intent. I think it's really important that we try our best to give credit where credit is due. And Lolita is one of those fashions that is more of a silhouette and has some very basic rules. They're more like guidelines, and those rules define the fashion, but it can draw inspiration from the 80s, from the 50s, from dolls, from cosmetics, from fantasy. It basically pulls from every direction that you can think of. I've even seen a dress series that's based on The Little Prince. But even if it were, I just want to let you know some news. Victorian and Rococo fashion as a whole are largely credited to be influenced by the silk trade and the different dynasties that existed in China at the time. In fact, the reason that we call Baroque China fine China is because it comes from China. So a lot of that very ornate, highly decorated, like sculptural references with all the nature prints in the background, that is all from China. So even if Lolita was influenced by Rococo, it would still land at being an Asian fashion. And therefore, we should not make decisions about it if we are not Asian. And I am not. So I don't plan on making any decisions about it. I'm just grateful to be here. And anyway, thank you for your comment. Hope you're having a good day.
Just a quick note to say, the girl actually responded to my comment on TikTok before I had fully edited this video. So here's her response.
Hey girl, just waiting on your video response with scientific journals sourced as well to prove that Lolita is in fact a European fashion. Hope that you had a lovely holiday season. Take care.
It led me to another couple of videos by the same person, and I left a comment, maybe just one or two, and then I realized it would be so much better just to make a video about the subject. So zero shade to this person. It's a real opportunity here to talk about this thing. So in this video, the girl states sort of three main points, maybe between this video and one or two other of her videos, about Lolita fashion. Okay, so the first main point she makes is that Lolita fashion is not based on British or European fashion. It's not based on French Rococo, it's not based on Victorian attire, and that there basically is no solid basis to suggest that Lolita is based on those things. Her second point, I guess, is that even if we were to say it was based on sort of French Rococo, their fashion is said to be really inspired by the silk trade, by the patterns and such, so even then that still lands it back at being an Asian fashion specifically. And I guess her third point is that if you feel that that is unfair, that you should have a stake in where Lolita fashion is created, you know, to say that it is based in European or British fashion, that you are doing so because if it's not, you'll be sort of accused of cultural appropriation, and that if that's the reason, that says more about you than it does about other people. So I would like to address each 3 of these points and just chuck in some, I don't know, links and pictures and stuff. So the first point, Lolita fashion is not based in European or British fashion. First, I just want to look at the language, based in. So most people will say inspired by. And at one point she actually makes the comment that fashion is a homogeneous blob. And I agree, it is. It is fashion is many layers of things put together over a very long period of time from every corner of the world. So in terms of appropriating, that in itself is kind of difficult because fashion is such a shared experience, and kind of deliberately so. You know, we all like bits of each other's stuff, and for good reason. Firstly, if you look at some of our Lolita fashion gods, Misako, for example, who is widely considered the kind of god king of Lolita fashion, she will actually explain to you that Lolita fashion is inspired by French Rococo, Victorian, England, and Europe in the sort of 16th, 17th, 18th century. Massive inspiration. If you speak to Lolita fashion designers, people like Kira Imai, she will also explain that this is where the inspiration comes from for Lolita fashion, even for old school. One of the points that should be made is that adult Victorian fashion slightly differs from child Victorian fashion, and generally the comparison, particularly with length, the fact that our dresses sit sort of on or below the knee, that is child's Victorian fashion, not specifically adults. She mentions at some point that the relation to Lolita fashion being inspired by the West or by Europe is mostly down to the silhouette, which is partially true, but also falls a little flat. The shape of the Lolita outfit is entirely influenced by the Western Europe. The petticoat that gives us our poofy shape was invented in England in the 1500s. The idea of having this sort of shaped bodice with a small waist and then this poof, the design of the dress itself, the idea that you have, for example, a solid piece with a fastening up the back, like corset lacing or buttons, and then this solid shape, often with sleeves, and then the poofy skirt. Even just the composition of that is distinctly British and European. In Japan, if you compare clothes round about the same time, it is wrap type situation, and the idea of their shape, especially for women, was actually to hide form, not enhance form. And although Europe and Britain were very modest for a lot of it, for dressing women, shape was still very important. We liked a tiny waist for many hundreds of years, probably still now actually. We like a tiny waist, whereas the style of dress in Japan at the time and for hundreds of years was to hide shape. And even just the composition of the outfit itself is wrapping. It is not solid pieces. There are a series of gowns, I suppose, that are wrapped and then bound with a belt in the middle. Even if you just want to compare shoes as an example, we've had this kind of Mary Jane type shoe, or even the flat with the covered toes, for many hundreds of years, where if you compare to Japan's style at the same time and before and after, what you have is toed socks and wooden sandals, essentially, which again are not comparable in a sense of design. Things like bloomers, bonnet, these are all distinctly British and European in origin, did not exist in Japan at the time or before. So when you're talking about something being influenced by something else, in order to be influenced by something, that something had to have come before you. So Lolita fashion as a design, many of its elements, its shape, its composition, even the way the outfits are physically put together, all of that came from Britain and Europe well before it was ever entered into Japan. And in fact, if you hear our main Lolita gods talking about it, they will mention the 80s and the 90s as the development period of Lolita generally, even old school Lolita. And considering we were doing petticoats in the 15th century, I would say that Europe and Britain predate Japan in their design there. Again, she mentions the silk trade as being a big example, and in terms of fabric and design, totally true. See, if you watch documentaries or read anything about period dress in Europe and Britain, we were taken by storm by the design of fabric. If you watch the Marie Antoinette movie, I think with Kirsten Dunst, there's a bit where they talk about fabric that came from China and how, you know, glamorous and beautiful it is. But you can't make the argument that an entire fashion and all of its elements was entirely invented by the country that patterns became popular from. That's just not an argument that you can make. Ornate fabric designs that became popular, that were taken from places like China and Japan, of course, had a huge influence on fashion in Britain and in Europe. But that still does not bolster the argument that Lolita fashion was or is based entirely in Japan and not at all in Britain or in Europe. So at some point in her videos, she talks about the style of our prints being based on different time periods. And yeah, the style of the prints is entirely varied. It's everything from sort of classic floral prints to no prints to things like toys or 1950s diner. So yeah, the print style is from all over the shop, but the print does not dictate the entire fashion itself, in the same way that goth has gone through multiple different iterations, but the basis of it is still goth. When you change an aspect too much, it becomes a different thing. A lot of the pictures that I saw comparing, in her opinion, how Lolita fashion is obviously mimicking Japanese fashion, it was mainly color related, and there's one where it's sort of reds and whites on a Lolita dress compared to the reds and whites on a kimono. It's a geisha as well, and while I can say the colors are similar, that is where the comparison ends. There's a comparison made to China dolls actually at one point, saying that China dolls have a lot more influence, I suppose, to Lolita fashion than British fashion does. But China dolls, especially the ones that she pictured, were actually invented in Europe, in their style reflecting the fashions of the time in Europe. Dolls, as a concept, are, I don't even know if you could track the first ever doll, but the dolls that she compares to the Japanese dolls, which are Hina dolls, are, I suppose, similar in that they are dolls, but in terms of their style, they reflect Japanese fashion of the time, whereas China dolls reflect, like I say, European fashion of the time. Because fashion is such a changeable, amorphous thing, you could easily make arguments that fashion is created from multiple different cultures over a long period of time, because it's true. That is how fashion develops, and all the better for it. But to make the argument that Lolita fashion is not based in British and European fashion is just factually inaccurate, which is totally understandable, because the girl who made the videos isn't British or European. As far as I can hear, she sounds American. I could be wrong though. So the last point about the cultural appropriation thing, you know, essentially saying you want to say that Lolita fashion is based in or inspired by British or European fashion so that you have a right to wear it, or else it's cultural appropriation, is, in my opinion, an incredibly flawed and broken argument as it stands. Cultural appropriation is to steal culture. 9 times out of 10, culture is not stolen, it is shared and appreciated. Yeah, taking elements and saying, this is mine, this comes from me, I invented it, when clearly it came from somewhere else. Sure, that's appropriation. In this case, again, if you speak to Japanese people on their opinion on Westerners wearing Lolita fashion, or Westerners wearing traditional Japanese dress, ask the Japanese how they feel about it. And they will tell you that they are delighted in both instances to see British and European people wearing something that's either cultural for them, like the kimono, and sharing it with the world, or something like Lolita. That's why people like Misako and the Kawaii ambassador, for example, that's why they travel from place to place. The purpose is to deliver Lolita fashion and its greatness everywhere, as much as humanly possible. It's why, along with money, I suppose, they opened stores in Paris and in America, because they want to distribute Lolita everywhere. So the idea that wearing it, if it was not influenced or made by your culture, being an appropriation is in itself, it's a non-argument. In conclusion, Lolita fashion has several very strong bases that demonstrate its influence coming from Europe and coming from Britain over a long span of time, which is a great thing. The fact that other people are into Lolita fashion, that it's becoming a more global thing, is also a great thing. Every Lolita I've ever spoken to is very outspoken about how Japan put all of these pieces together and created what is modern day Lolita fashion, and how pleased we are for it. Because before Lolita, before I knew about Lolita, all I wanted to do was wear French Rococo and Victorian dress. That's all I ever wanted to do, and this is a much more doable version of that. So thank you, Japan, for taking all of these puzzle pieces that already existed in different places, and that's fine, and put them together to create what is now Lolita. Without you, we wouldn't have it. Or we might not have it for, I don't know, hundreds of years, and that would be very sad. My main reason for addressing this is that there are always new Lolitas, and we're all quite pernickety about making sure that when a stranger asks you, what is it and where does it come from, that you know how to answer the question. And this is the main reason that I've made the video. I want new Lolitas and people that don't know to understand the history of fashion and how all these things came together. And, you know, my answer about where it comes from is that it was created in Japan as a response to changing modesty culture. Women were starting to show more skin, and some people weren't cool with that, and a bunch of people were like, I want to be modest though. And so Lolita fashion bloomed, and it takes heavy inspiration from French Rococo period, Marie Antoinette type style, but also the Victorian period, but also everything in between as well. It's not just those things, it's like a whole chunk of time. And the shape and the elements are a major part of what makes the fashion the fashion. The bloomers, the petticoat, the headdresses, the whole shape and design, all of it is hugely important to the creation of the style. Without a petticoat, it's not Lolita. Without the modesty factor, you know, the covering of the collarbone and the fact that it is knee length and not, for example, thigh length, modesty factor is also a huge part of what makes it Lolita. So again, I just want to reiterate, this is not dig, it's not shade, none of that. I saw it and I thought, okay, this is an opportunity that I would like to take to make some stuff. So we're all adults. I expect the people that watch my stuff are not childish idiots, and you're not gonna go and leave mean comments or something, because that's not how we do things. Anyway guys, thank you for watching this video. I hope that you found it interesting, and I hope I will see you all again next time. Okay? Please like, share, comment, subscribe, all of that jazz, and I'll see you all next time. Okay, bye-bye. Love!